Okay, let's knock out chapter 4 on business buyer behavior. So, chapter 3 was talking more about the individual. Chapter 4 is talking about selling to businesses. And frankly, there's a much bigger market in selling to a business than there is to an individual. Um, Ultimately, it seems like products reach, the end user, but before it gets there, sometimes that product is bought and sold two or three different times to businesses. It's reworked, it's added to before it actually gets to us. So it's a huge source of business. And in marketing, a lot of companies don't sell to individuals, but they sell to other organizations. So that's what we're here to talk about. And how it's different. There's a lot of differences in the purchase and marketing of business products, but just generally speaking, here are some of the characteristics of businesses in terms of purchasing. Number one, they usually purchase larger amounts. You and I would buy a laptop computer. A business would buy 200 laptop computers for their employees. Quite often, they buy kind of bigger, more expensive, more complex items. So you and I might buy a little personal copier for our house. A business is going to buy a huge copy machine that can collate and fold and, you know, um, do other types of things, and maybe more heavy duty and, just a bigger, more complex product. Or, a company would have an information technology system, where we don't have a system, we just buy whatever Microsoft gives us. Um, the decision making process is more complex. So, when you and I go to the mall to buy a shirt, we walk in, we take a look, we go to a couple stores, we see one we like, compare prices, we buy it. If a business is buying uniforms for its employees, well, all right, we're outfitting, 3,000 employees. We want to make sure that, these uniforms or clothes um, are going to work for everybody. So they have to put more thought into it. Um, Generally, when we buy things as individuals, we like it, we buy it. When a business buys something, it may have to run through a professional buyer, it may have to run through a committee, it may have to get approval. Um, and it's a lot of times it's important that it works. Not that we don't want our things to work, but for example, you buy a lawnmower and if it doesn't work, okay, that's a pain. You got to take it to the hardware store, get it fixed. But if your lawn's not mowed for a week or two, it's not the end of the world. If a manufacturing plant buys certain components for its assembly line and those things aren't high quality and they break and the whole assembly line shuts down and 400 people can't do their work because you bought one low quality part that broke a piece of the assembly line, that's serious stuff, right? We're talking lots of dollars and lots of complications. So companies, businesses have to be generally more careful about their purchases than you or I do, because when things don't work, the problems get exacerbated and affect productivity and things like that. In the business to business, what we call B2B marketing, generally you have fewer customers than the business to consumer, chapter 3, B2C marketing. Now, those customers might buy a lot more, but you have fewer of them. So if I'm going to market to B2B clients, I might only market to 50 or 100. If I'm marketing to consumers, I might be marketing to 10,000 or 100,000 or a million. Um, we will get into this later talking about different types of marketing strategies, but personal selling is one of the ways we market. And of course, advertising is one, direct mail and promotions. Personal selling is a tool, and this is where a salesperson calls on someone to try to persuade them to buy the product. In B2B selling, the personal sales guy or gal is super important. And a lot of times it's necessary, one, to explain the product, to answer questions. You're probably not going to sell $1 million computer system to someone because they saw your ad on TV or you sent them a pretty postcard explaining how great your system was. Someone's probably have to go there and talk to them and say, hey, let's dig into this. What do you really need done? What are your big problems? Here's how this can help you. And so personal selling is a bigger part of it. And stricter standards, stricter specifications for business to business buying. Again, because when things go wrong, it can really mess up a whole organization. Whereas if something goes wrong for you or me, not that we're not important, but it usually doesn't turn our life upside down. Whereas business, it could turn a business upside down. Okay, so let's talk about the types of B2B buyers. Number one, you have producers. So these are businesses, manufacturers that make things. Two, you have resellers, companies that don't necessarily make things, but they buy them and then they resell them. So if you've ever heard of a wholesaler, that's a business that they buy from manufacturers and then they turn around and sell usually to retailers. So all they're doing is they're moving the product. They bought 100 TVs from the manufacturer, they put them in their warehouse, and then they found 10 stores that each want 10 TVs. And, they will deliver them. They provide some other benefits, but basically they don't make anything. They just facilitate the exchange. And so that's a big business. And there's a lot of resellers out there who buy product, but they're not the end user. The government would fall under B2B because it's an organization. And the government's not really a person. But think of all the government offices that you can think of. The post office, Social Security Administration, your city government, your state government, your national senators and Congress people. Do they buy things? Oh, yeah. They buy desks, they buy paper, they buy meals, they buy everything. Right? They buy all the same things that you and I probably buy. And just like, they're going to buy computer systems and they're going to buy furniture and all that kind of stuff. And then institutions. So schools, hospitals, other types of entities. While they may not be the for-profit business, they still need to be profitable so they can continue to do their mission and stay doing things. So these are the types of entities that we're looking at in the B2B market. Okay, so we talked last chapter about the process that people go through to make a purchase. Well, businesses go through the same kind of process, but I want to introduce to you this concept of a buying center, because in B2B marketing, quite often there are multiple important people involved in the purchase. It's not just an individual. And so the members of the buying center, some of those you could say, well, that applies to consumers too, and it does. But it's more important here. So number one is the initiator. So quite often in business, someone plays the role of getting things started. Maybe the president says, all right, we are committed to upgrading quality in the entire company. And that starts a series of discussions like, okay, well, what do we need to buy to enhance quality? Maybe it's this person that kind of gets it kicked off. And it could be anybody. It could be an employee. It could be a customer. It could be management. And then you have your influencer. So this is your expert. So let's say, for example, business decides we want to get a new information technology system. Is there somebody that they're going to listen to? Probably the chief information officer, right? That person has expertise in the area. We value their opinion. We're not going to go to the sales manager, probably, or somebody else. We're going to go to, who is the influencer? Whose opinion really matters a lot? Maybe it's the president. Um, maybe it's the vice president of finance. Hard to say. Okay. We probably need to talk to the users. So in business, quite often, they have professional purchasers. People are actually paid to buy things for companies. So if you like buying things, that could be a really good job for you. Now, the person who buys, they're good at the buying process. They're good at looking at bids. They're good at checking and comparing, but they're probably not the person who uses the product. They probably just buy it for someone else to use. So another good party that we want to pay attention to is who's going to be using the product. Because a lot of times a business, before they make a purchase, they will talk to the purchaser, or someone will talk to the people who actually use the product and say, hey, what do you like? What do you want? And I'll try and get it for you. Um, then we also need to look at a person called the gatekeeper. Now, sometimes in business, we can't always get to the person who makes a decision before, or in the process of trying to get to that person, we run into the person who's screening for them. So let's say, for example, I got to get to the president. This is the person. She's going to make the decision on what to buy for the company. But whenever I call to talk to the president, I get her assistant. And then the assistant tries to ask me questions and tries to screen me out and won't let me get to who I actually need to talk to. So it's important to learn how to engage and win over the gatekeeper, because that person can lead you to who the ultimate decider is. And the decider, again, that's another role in the buying center. Who's the person who actually makes a decision? I want to get to that person. So anyway, there are multiple parties involved usually in a business purchase decision. And so we don't just appeal to one person, we have to appeal to a bunch of people. And a lot of times in businesses, they will purchase via committee. So you may need to go in and sell to a team of people, not just an individual. Okay, so other things that are different about B2B buying is that it's more of a formal process. You know, you might have a purchase order versus someone on a whim just going and buying something. A business, there's a process that you go through. Quite often, businesses will put out bids or RFPs, which stand for requests for proposals. And so it almost works backwards in the buying process. A business will put out a bid, say, well, this is what we want. And maybe it's a $1 or $2 million project. So that's why sellers are like, I want to see that bid. I want to see how I can fit it. But the buyer is telling you, this is what I want. Put together a request for a proposal. You tell me what you can do for me to meet my needs, and then I'll decide whether I want to go with you or not. We don't do that as individuals. You could go get some bids for your roof, but generally speaking, you don't go ask people to bid for your business. But in B2B, where the volume is significant and the sales value is high, they can do that. And it's an efficient way for them to figure out who can actually provide what I need. Oftentimes in business, we will have certified vendors or certified suppliers. And so these are people that have gone through a process that have proven they're going to meet our specs, which, as I said before, is kind of important in B2B, because if we don't get the right quality products, it could turn our business upside down, create really big problems for us. So one thing that we know in business is that quality and efficiency a lot of times is way more important than price. As a business owner, I'll probably pay 15-20% more as long as I know it's going to work and it's going to be good for me. I don't want to pay that much more, but I'm not going to go cheap and then end up something breaking down and it's going to create havoc for my business. Okay. The other thing is that relationships are really important. We talked a little bit before about personal salespeople. In business buying, I want to know that I can count on this guy and then I can call him when I need something to fix a problem for me, or I need something in an emergency. And that relationship and being able to count on people is very important. And if I don't have that, I might not choose you. Whereas as an individual, certain people you don't have a relationship, maybe you're a hairstylist or, you're golf pro, but you don't really have much of a relationship with your store, grocery store, do you? And you go in and if they carry the products that you want, you buy. But in business, relationships are really important. Oftentimes in business too, we see a lot of reciprocity. So, okay, I will hire your firm to be an architect for my new building, but I sell insurance and I sure would appreciate it if you'd buy insurance through me. And so you see a lot of that. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Of course, not all the time because, you know, um, architect might do 5 insurance buildings and they can't have insurance with all 5 people. Okay, so when we look at purchases in the B2B world, we can break them down into 3 kinds, called the straight rebuy, the modified rebuy, and the new purchase. And so a straight rebuy is just sort of like reordering supplies. Oh, my copiers are out of toner. Let's just get some more. I didn't want to, I might sign a 3-year contract. Every time my toner is low, I'll buy a new a toner tube for $12.50. I don't want to renegotiate every time. I don't want to go out and bid this thing out. I want it done. I need new papers, clips, new pencils, this and that. So I don't want to put time and effort into it. Just do a reorder. And a lot of this stuff is going online too. So I'll just zip an order and boom, the next day the stuff shows up. The modified rebuy is kind of in between the new purchase and the straight rebuy. Something may be changed, and I need to take a little harder look at it. It's not just a thoughtless reorder, but it's like, oh, okay, maybe I need to look at something, but not too much. And then the new purchase is something I've never done before. So especially if it's important or it's high dollar item, I'm going to spend some time and effort making sure I'm getting the right thing. And so those are the 3 categories that we have. You approach them differently in terms of marketing. So the straight rebuy is just all about efficiency and getting it done and avoiding hassle. The new purchase, I'm going to have to go through the whole process again and win this person over because they've never had a relationship with me before. Let's see. The book talked a little bit about international B2B, and I don't want to glide over that because global is really important in our world. A lot of worldwide companies, 80% of their business is outside of their borders. I mean, think about in the United States, we only have 5% of the world's population. So while we're an affluent country, if you really want to grow, wouldn't you want to go to where 95% of the population is, which is abroad? So that's really important. The book talked also a little bit about in B2B, a lot of times we'll see where industries cluster. And so sometimes it's due to natural resources, sometimes it's due to expertise. So, for example, a lot of the tech companies are out in Silicon Valley in Northern California. You probably aren't going to find that in Iowa or in Texas. But that's where, in new startup companies, they'll go there because they want to be around that environment and that technology. And maybe the people that they're working with are there. And so it just makes sense. So that's sort of become a hub for technology. Um, the oil business, okay, heavy concentration in the Middle East. Well, duh, why is that? Well, that's where all the oil is, right? So we tend to see where you'll see clusters of different industries show up in certain places of the world. And so, again, if I want to market to high tech companies, I'm not going to spread my marketing efforts evenly across the country. I'm going to concentrate it in areas like Silicon Valley, where that's where all the business is. E-commerce, gosh, what can I say about that? Exploding, and a lot of B2B stuff is just done online. Um, right? We can see videos, we can see pictures. I can order online. I don't have to deal with paperwork and signing. I've got a record of it. It's just going to continue to explode and grow more. Yeah, e-commerce is the way of the future, right? And then let's see, ethics. Well, ethics is important in everything that we do in marketing. What I might say is that ethics in the B2B is maybe more of an issue because when you're talking about larger dollar amounts, there might be more temptations to cut corners in terms of quality or kickbacks and bribes and stuff like that. So we want to always be aware of that. And again, at Ambrose, business for the greater good. We want to do things the right way, and just caution you as you're in B2B relationships and transactions. Um, Try not to cut corners, right? We always want to increase profitability, but we've seen ethics take down organizations, a la Enron and you know those kind of things. So make sure that you're doing business the right way. Okay, that covers chapter 4. So we knocked another one out.